Hello, and welcome to the Creating Custom Dialog Boxes module in our Introduction to VBA for ArcMap course. My name is Eric Pimpler, and I will be presenting this module. This module will cover the principles of creating custom dialog boxes that can be used to communicate with end users. This module covers the creation of custom dialog boxes that can be used to communicate with end users. These custom dialog boxes are also known as user forms in VBA and can be used to present and gather information. The most basic type of custom dialog box in VBA is the message box. Message boxes are great for gathering or presenting small amounts of information. However, they are unsuitable for more advanced information presentation needs. VBA user forms provide an appropriate method for the development of advanced information presentation and gathering needs. In this module, we'll first learn how to create new user forms and add controls to the forms in a visually pleasing manner. We'll cover in detail many of the controls that can be added to a user form. Some of these controls include labels, text boxes, command buttons, list boxes, radio buttons, check boxes, and others. Each of these controls provides a visual tool for presenting or gathering information. We'll also cover some basic information related to these controls. Message boxes are the simplest example of forms in VBA and are suitable for displaying small amounts of information. Here are a number of examples of situations that are suitable for use with message boxes. Some of the advantages of using message boxes include the presentation and/or gathering of simple information to a user. They are also very simple to set up and use. Disadvantages include a limited set of options that can be provided, along with the inability to include controls other than command buttons. Creating a message box in your VBA code requires the use of the message box VBA function. The only required argument is a prompt, which is the text displayed in the message box. Most uses of the message box function will also include the buttons argument, which specifies which buttons to include on the message box. By default, only the OK button will be displayed. In the example at the bottom of this slide, we are using the VB Yes, No, Cancel enumeration, which will display a Yes, No, and Cancel button to the user. Other optional arguments include a title, which will be displayed at the top of the message box window, and two arguments related to the inclusion of help files. As we discussed in the previous slide, the optional buttons argument can be used to specify which buttons are placed on the message box. This can be specified either through an integer or constant value provided by VBA. The table on this slide gives you a few examples of the types of buttons that can be included. This list is not all-inclusive. In addition, the examples on this slide show you how to specify the buttons in your VBA code. Icons can also be added to your message box for added emphasis. These icons are also specified through the use of integer or constant values provided by VBA. See the table and example for more information on how to add an icon to your message box. Input boxes can be used to capture information typed by the user. They are perfect situations where you only need to capture a single piece of information. Information typed by the user can then be saved to a variable in your code. The syntax for an input box is similar to that of a message box. As with message boxes, only the prompt argument is required for an input box. This is the text displayed in the input box. Optional arguments include a title and a default value that can be placed into the text box displayed in the input box. As mentioned in the previous slide, you can hold the value input by the user in a variable in your code. In this example, we declare a string variable that will be used to store the information. We then set this variable equal to the information that has been typed in the input box. We are then free to use this information in other sections of our code. While message boxes and input boxes are great for displaying or collecting simple information, you will soon run into situations where they just aren't suitable. This is where user forms come into play. User forms allow you to create highly flexible forms for interacting with your users. Take a look at this image to see what a new user form looks like. It's basically just an empty canvas waiting for you to add controls and code to. Each user form has a toolbox containing built-in VBA controls that can be added to the form. These are the default controls, but there are many other controls available through Microsoft and many third-party vendors. Here we see an example of a form that has been created through the addition of controls from the toolbox. The first step in creating a new user form is to insert a form into the current project. You can accomplish this in a number of ways, which are all detailed here. Any of these methods will create a new empty form in your project. Click the link in this slide to see a demonstration Demonstration of how to create a new user form in the VBA editor. When you insert a new user form into your project, VBA will automatically name the form in the format userFormN, where n is a unique number. Good coding conventions would suggest that you rename this form to something that closely describes how you're using it. For example, if you're creating a form that prompts the user to select a layer from the ArcMap table of contents, you might name your form FRM Select Layer. This is more descriptive than userForm1 and will make it easier and more efficient to write and maintain your code. The name of the form can be changed through the Name property in the Properties window. Like other controls, forms have a number of properties that can be set at design time or runtime. Some of the more commonly set properties include caption, backcolor, border style, startup position, and show modal. Caption refers to the text that is displayed at the top of the form window. Backcolor defines the color of your form. Border style can be used to disallow users the ability to change the size of the form and/or remove, minimize, and maximize buttons. Startup position defines where the form will initially be displayed on the user's monitor. Show modal defines whether or not a user is forced to enter a response before returning to the main application. A user form without controls doesn't offer much functionality. By adding controls to the form, you allow the user to interact with your form and enable you to gather input from the user and respond to events triggered by the user. When a user form is active, a toolbox will be displayed which allows you to add controls to the form. The basic VBA toolbox contains the most commonly used controls, including labels, text boxes, command buttons, list boxes, radio buttons, and others. You add a control to the form by clicking the control and dragging it to the form. Just as we renamed our user form to something more meaningful, it is also good programming convention to rename each of our controls to something more meaningful. Each control that is added to the form will follow the same naming convention as we saw with forms. For example, when you add a text box control to a form, it is given a default name of textbox n, where n is a unique integer. This should be renamed to something more meaningful, such as textbox latitude, or whatever best describes the control. Controls are renamed through the Name property in the Properties window. Each control can be moved around on your form. Use your mouse to click a control that you would like to move or resize. The control will become highlighted with small boxes around the perimeter. Hold down your mouse button and drag the control to the desired position. Controls can be resized by clicking on one of the highlighted squares and dragging. VBA is an event-driven language. Events can generally be defined as actions that have been taken by a user. For instance, when a user clicks a button on a form, this triggers a click event. You write code in the VBA editor to respond to these events. Each control has a number of events that you can write code for in response to the event. You are not required to write code for each event, but rather only those that apply to your situation. Events for a control are located in the form module where they are contained. You can access these events by double-clicking the control. This will bring up the code window with the selected control in the left combo box and the list of events in the right combo box. As we mentioned in the previous slide, each form and control can respond to many events. Here are some examples of controls and events that they respond to. It's important to note that each of these controls have multiple events that they can respond to. You can write code that responds to each of these events by selecting the event from the list of events. This will generate a code stub for the event. You write your code inside this procedure, which is also known as an event procedure. Click the link on this slide to see a demonstration of writing code code for events. In this section, we'll take a closer look at some of the more commonly used controls, including labels, text boxes, combo boxes, check boxes, option buttons, and command buttons. There are many more controls that you can use to develop your forms, but we'll focus on these for now to develop your understanding of how controls work. Additional controls can be accessed by right-clicking the toolbox and selecting Additional Controls. All controls registered on your computer will be displayed. Third-party controls can be purchased through many vendors. Labels are simple controls that do nothing more than display text on a form. You can use the caption property to assign the text that you want to the label. Visibility of the text is controlled through the visibility property. This property can be set to true or false. The text box control allows a user to enter text into a box. This information can then be used programmatically. Use the text property to get or set text values for the control. There are many other additional properties that you can set through the Properties window at design time. The combo box control allows you to store a list of values that can be selected from a drop-down style control. Values are assigned to the combo box through the add item procedure at runtime. For example, combo box 1.addItem John Doe would add a new text item to the combo box. The text property can be used to get or set the current text value that is displayed in the combo box. The checkbox control is useful for offering your users a yes or no, true or false choice. When the control is clicked, it toggles between the yes and no state. The caption property can be used to give the checkbox a descriptive name. The value property can be queried at runtime to determine if the user has selected the control. Option buttons are also known as radio buttons and are typically used in groups of 2 or more. This grouping offers a set of mutually exclusive choices to the user. Selecting one option button turns off all option buttons in the group. You can use the caption property to give the option button a meaningful text display. The value property is used to determine if the option button is selected. A value of true indicates that the option button has been selected, while a value of false indicates that the option button is not selected. Command buttons are simply buttons that you can place on your form for a user to click. Typically, you will write code for the click event of this control to respond to the click. In addition to the click event, some of the more commonly used events include key down, key press, key up, mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up.